All right, chapter 19. In the Encyclopedia Britannica, the story of Caspar Hauser is said to be one of the most baffling mysteries in history. This is an unusual statement. Mostly, we met denials that there are mysteries. In everything that I have read upon this case, it is treated as if it were unique. A writer like Andrew Lang, who has a liking for mysteries, takes up such a case with not an indication of a thought in his mind that it should not be studied as a thing in itself, but should be correlated with similars. That, inductively, anything of an ultimate nature could be found out is no delusion of mine. I think not of a widening of truth, but of a lessening of error. I am naive enough in my own ways, but I have not the youthful hopes of John Stuart Mill and Francis Bacon. As to one of the most mysterious of the circumstances in the story of Caspar Hauser, I have many records of attacks upon human beings by means of an unknown missileless weapons. See the newspapers for several dozen accounts of somebody or something that was terrorizing people in New Jersey in and around Camden in the winter of 1927 and 28. People were fired upon, and in automobiles there were bullet holes, but bullets were unfindable. I know of two other instances in the state of New Jersey. In France, about the year 1910, there was a long series of such attacks attributed to phantom bandits. It may be that telepathically human beings have been induced to commit suicide. Look up the drowning of Frank Podmore. It may be that the mystery of Caspar Hauser was attracting too much attention. There is a strange similarity in the taking off of Frank Podmore, Houdini, Washington Irving Bishop, and perhaps Dr. Crawford. The list is long of the deaths that followed the opening of the tomb of Tutankhamun. Psychologically and physiologically, the case of Reverend Thomas Hanna is so much like the case of Caspar Hauser that the suggestion is that if Hanna were not an impostor, Hauser was not. For particulars of the Hanna case, see Sidis multiple personality. In both cases, there was said to be obliteration of memory or reduction to the mental state of the newborn, with, however, uncommon or marvelous ability to learn. Phenomena common to both cases were no idea of time, no idea of sex, appearance of all things as if at the same distance, or no idea of distance and inability or difficulty in walking. Caspar Hauser was no impostor who played a stunt of his own invention as tellers of his story of thought. If he were an impostor somewhere, back in times when little was known of amnesia, he had gotten a hold of a detailed knowledge of the profoundest amnesia. And he was about 17 years old. Perhaps he was in a state of profound hypnosis. If the boy of Nepal, India, had wandered from the priest, who may have kidnapped him ordinarily and may not have kidnapped him ordinarily, and had appeared in an English community, he would have been unable to account for himself, and there would have been a mystery similar to Hauser's. If a wolf child, when found, was almost devoid of human intelligence, and when grown up became a policeman, ours is not quite the cynicism of a scenario writer or a writer of detective stories. If we do not think that this child had been the associate of wolves from an age of a few months, we think of an obliterative process that rendered it a speechless little animal. But that did not so impair its mentality. Mentality that the child could not start anew. Our expression upon Caspar Hauser will be that he was a wolf child, and that if he had appeared somewhere in India, he would, according to local conventions, probably be called a wolf child, and that if he had found any place of refuge, it would be called a wolf's den. But in our expression, the lupine explanation is not accepted in his case and the cases of all so called wolf children. Wolf children have appeared, and the conventional story of their origin is not satisfactory. If wolf children have had something the matter with their legs or have crawled on all fours, it is not satisfactory to say that this was because they had been brought up with wolves any more than it would be to say that a young bird, even if not taught by its parents would not be able to fly if brought up with mammals. If we accept that the Pansini boys ever were teleported, we note the mental effects of the experience in that way were in a state of profound hypnosis. Hold on. My nose is running. I'm sorry. Or seals in a pond in the park, and the braided reindeer of Spritzbergen. See back to everything else in this book. Later, especially see back to lights in the sky and the disappearance of them when a story was told, and so long as the story was not examined, seemed to account for them. The luminous owl, the Malamute, and if anybody can't be explained conventionally, he's an imposter. Or if we're all, to some degree, imposters, he's an exceptional imposter. Upon Whit Monday afternoon, May 1828, a youth aged 16 or 17 staggered with a jaunty stride into the town of Nuremberg, Germany. Or, while painfully dragging himself along the ground, he capered into the town. The story has been told by theorists. The tellers have fitted descriptions around their theories. The young man was unable fully to govern the motions of his legs, according to Andrew Lang, for instance. He walked with firm, quick steps, according to the Duchess of Cleveland. The Duchess's theory required that nothing should be the matter with his legs. By way of the new gate, he entered the town, and there was something the matter with his legs, according to all writers, except the one who preferred that there should be nothing the matter with his legs. To Nurembergers who gathered around, the boy held out 2 letters, one of which was addressed to a cavalry captain. He was taken to the captain's house, but because the captain was not at home and because he could give no account of himself, he was then taken to a police station. Here it was recorded that he could speak only 2 sentences in the German language, and that when given paper and pencil, he wrote the name Caspar Hauser, but he was not put away and forgotten. He had astonished and mystified Nurembergers in the captain's house, and these townsmen had told others, so that a crowd had gone with him to the station house, remaining outside discussing this strange arrival. It was told in the crowd, as recorded by von Feuerbach, that near the new gate of the town had appeared a boy who seemed unacquainted with the commonest objects and experiences of everyday affairs of human beings. The astonishment with which he had looked at the captain's saber had attracted attention. He had been given a pot of beer. The luster of the pot and the color of the beer affected him as if he had never seen anything of the kind before. Later, seeing a burning candle, he cried out in delight with it, and before anybody could stop him, he tried to pick up the flame. Here his education began. This is the story that has been considered imposture by everybody who wanted to consider it imposture. I cannot say whether all alleged cases of amnesia are fakes or not. I say that if there be amnesia, the phenomena of Caspar Hauser are aligned with phenomena of many cases that are said to be well known. The safest and easiest and laziest of explanations is that of impostor. Of the 2 letters, one purported to be from the boy's mother, dated 16 years before, telling that she was abandoning her infant, asking the finder to send him to Nuremberg, when he became 17 years old, to enlist in the 6th Cavalry Regiment, of which his father had been a member. The other letter purported to be from the finder of the infant, telling that he had 10 children of his own and could no longer support the boy. Someone soon found that these letters had not been written by different persons 16 years apart. One of them was in Latin characters, but both were written with the same ink upon the same kind of paper. In the latter letter, it was said, "I have taught him to read and write, and he writes my handwriting exactly as I do." Whereupon the name that Caspar had written in the police station was examined, and it was said that the writings were similar. Largely, with this circumstance for a basis, it has been said that Caspar Hauser was an impostor, or that he had written the letters himself. with what expectation of profit to himself is not made clear. If I must argue, I argue that an impostor, aware that handwritings may be compared, would, if he were a good impostor, pretend to be unable to write as well as unable to speak. And those who consider Caspar Hauser an impostor say that he was a very good impostor. The explanation in the letter of the similarity of handwritings seems to be acceptable enough. People living along the road leading to the new gate were questioned. Not an observation upon the boy before he appeared near the gate could be heard of, but we see, if we accept that someone else wrote his letters, that this gate could not have been his appearing point, in the sense we're thinking of. Damn you. Damn it. Where is it? He must have been with or in the custody of someone else, or at least for a while. Streets near the jail, where for a time he was lodged, were filled with crowds clamoring for more information. Excitement and investigation spread far around Nuremberg. A reward was offered, and throughout Germany the likeness of Caspar Hauser was posted in public places. People in Hungary took up the investigation. Writers in France made much of the mystery, and the story was published in England. People from all parts of Europe went to see the boy. The mystery was so stimulated by pamphleteers that, though feverish seems an extreme word, writers describe the excitement over this boy, who had appeared as if from the clouds, as a fever. Because of this international interest, Caspar Hauser was known as the Child of Europe. The city of Nuremberg adopted Caspar. He was sent to live with Professor Domer, a well-known scientist, and the mayor of Nuremberg notified the public to keep away from his present residence and thereby avoid collision with the police. The seeming paralysis of his legs wore off. He quickly learned the German language, but spoke always with a foreign accent. I have been unable to learn anything of the peculiarities of this accent, except students of revivals of obliterated memories. His quickness in learning would seem incredible. Writers have said that so marvelous was his supposed ability to learn that he must have been an impostor, having a fair education to start with. Though the impostor theory is safest and easiest, some writers have held that the boy was an idiot who had been turned adrift. This explanation can be held simply and honestly by anybody who refuses to believe all records after the first week or so of observations. Whether impostor or idiot, the outstanding mystery is the origin of this continentally advertised boy. The look of all the circumstances to me is that somebody got rid of Caspar, considering him an imbecile, having been able to teach him only 2 German sentences. Then the look is that he had not for years known Caspar, but had known him only a few weeks, while his disabilities were new to him. Where this custodian found the boy is a mystery. Caspar Hauser, in the year 1829, wrote his own story, telling that until the age of 16 or 17, he had lived upon bread and water in a small dark cell. He had known only one person, alluded to by him as the man, who, towards the end of his confinement, had taught him 2 sentences, one of them signifying that he wished to join a cavalry regiment, and the other, I don't know. He had been treated kindly, except once when he had been struck for being noisy. Almost anybody reading this account will, perhaps regretfully, perhaps not, say farewell to our idea of a teleported boy. That settles it. But nothing ever has settled anything except relatively to a desire for settlement, and if ours is a desire for unsettlement, we have assurance that we or any other theorist can find in the uncertainties of any human document, whether supposed to have been dictated from on high or written by a boy, material for thinking as our theories require. We note in Caspar's story a statement that he had no idea of time. That is refreshing to our wilting theory. We may think that he had lived in a small dark room all his life, of which he had remembrance, and that that may have been a period of only a few weeks. We pick upon his statement that once he had been struck for being noisy. To us, that means that he had been confined, not in a cell or a dungeon, but in a room in a house with neighbors around, and that there was somebody else's fear that sounds from him would attract attention, or that there were neighbors so close to his place that the imprisonment of a boy could not have been kept a secret more than a few weeks. We're not satisfied. We hunt for direct data for thinking that if Caspar Hauser had been confined in a dark room, it had not been for more than a few weeks. He had a healthy color. Hiltel. He had a very healthy color. He did not appear pale or delicate, like one who had been some time in confinement. Policeman Wust. According to all that can be learned of another case, a man naked, almost helpless, perhaps in a state of hypnosis so profound that also it was physical, so that he could scarcely walk, and in whom memory was obliterated so that he did not know enough to make his way along a road which he crossed, appeared near Petersfield, Hampshire, February 21st, 1920. If we can think that a peasant near Nuremberg found on his farm a boy in a similar condition and took him in, then considering him an imbecile and wanting to get rid of him, keeping him in confinement, fearing he might be held responsible for him, and writing 2 letters that would explain an abandonment in commonplace terms that would not excite inquiry, but not being skillful in such matters, that looks as if we're explaining somewhat. Because of the continuation of Caspar's story, we think that this place was near Nuremberg. Whit Monday was a holiday, and the farmers or the neighbors were probably not laboring in the fields, so this was the day for the shifting of the supposed imbecile. Upon this day, as told by Caspar, the man carried the boy from the dark room and carried or led him, compelling him to keep his eyes downward towards Nuremberg. Caspar's clothes were changed for the abandonment. Perhaps he had been found naked and had been given makeshift garments. Perhaps he had been found in clothes or cut and texture that were remarkable and that would have caused inquiry. The clothes that were given to him were a peasant's. It was noted in Nuremberg that they seemed not to belong to him because Caspar was not a peasant boy, judging by the softness of his hands. Von Feuerbach. The story has resemblances to the story of the English boy of Nepal. In each case, somebody got rid of a boy, and in each case, it is probable that a false story was told. If the man in Caspar's case had the 10 children that, to excuse an abandonment he told of, there had been small chance for him to keep his secret. There are differences in these 2 stories. It will be my expression that they came about because of the wide difference in attention that was attracted. October 17th, 1829. Caspar was found in the cellar of Professor Demar's house, bleeding from a cut in the forehead. He said that a man in a black mask had appeared suddenly and had stabbed him. It had been explained that this was an attempted suicide, but stabbing oneself in the forehead is a queer way to attempt suicide, and in Nuremberg arose a belief that Caspar's life was in danger from unknown enemies, and 2 policemen were assigned to guard him. Upon an afternoon in May 1831, one of these policemen, while in one room, heard a pistol shot in another room. He ran there and found Caspar again, wounded in the forehead. Caspar said that it was an accident, that he had climbed upon the back of a chair and, reaching for a book, had slipped and, catching out wildly, had grasped a pistol that was hanging on the wall, discharging it. December 14th, 1833, Caspar Hauser ran from a park, crying that he had been stabbed. Deeply wounded in his side, he was taken to his home. The park, which was covered with new-fallen snow, was searched, but no weapon was found, and only Caspar's footprints were seen in the snow. 2 of the attending physicians gave their opinion that Caspar could not so have injured himself. The opinion of the 3rd physician was an indirect accusation of suicide, that the blow had been struck by a left-handed person. Caspar was not left-handed, but was ambidextrous. Caspar lay on his bed with his usual publicity. He was surrounded by tormentors who urged him to gas plugs in his story. He was the only human being who had been in the park, according to the testimony of the snow tracks. It was not only Casper who was wounded, there was a wound in circumstances. Tormentors urged him to confess so that, in terms of the known, they could fill out his story. Faith in confessions and the desire to end a mystery with a confession are so intense that some writers have said that Casper did confess. As a confession, they have interpreted his protest against his accusers. My God, that I should so die in shame and disgrace. Caspar Hauser died. The point of his heart had been pierced by something that had cut through the diaphragm, penetrating stomach and liver. In the opinion of two of the doctors and of many of the people of Nuremberg, this wound could not have been self-inflicted. Rewards for the capture of an assassin were offered. Again, throughout Germany, posters appeared in public places, and in Germany and other countries, there were renewed outbursts of pamphlets. The boy appeared as if from the clouds, and nothing more was learned. It was Caspar's story that a man in the park had stabbed him. If anybody prefers to think that it cannot be maintained that there was only one track of footprints in the snow, let him look up various accounts, and he will find assurances any way he wants to find them. For almost every statement that I have made, just as good authority for denying it as for stating it can be found, provided any two conflicting theories depend upon it. One can read that Caspar Hauser was highly intelligent or brilliant. One can read that the autopsy showed that his brain was atrophied to the size of a small animal's, accounting for his idiocy. One comes upon just about what one comes upon in looking up any other matter of history. It is said that history is a science. I think that it must be. A great deal, such as Caspar's alleged ability to see in the dark, and his aversion to eating meat, and his inability to walk, would be understandable if could be accepted the popular theory that Caspar Hauser was the rightful crown prince of Bavaria, who, for political reasons, had been kept for 16 or 17 years in a dungeon. There would be an explanation for two alleged attacks upon him. But see back to his own story of confinement in a house or a peasant's hut near Nuremberg, where probably his imprisonment could not have been kept secret more than a few weeks. See testimony by Hiltel and Wust. See back to a great deal more in this book. The Wolf of Shotley Bridge and the Wolf of Cumwinton, or that something removed one wolf and procured another wolf to the end a mystery that was attracting too much attention. Hold on. Oh, yeah. It was said that Caspar Hauser was murdered to suppress political disclosures. If it be thinkable that Caspar was murdered to suppress a mystery, whether political or not so easily defined, there are statements that support the idea that also some of the inhabitants of Nuremberg who were prominent in Caspar's affairs were murdered. One can read that von Feuerbach was murdered, or one can read that von Feuerbach died of a paralytic stroke. Say Evans, Caspar Hauser, page 150. That soon after the death of Caspar Hauser, several persons who had shown much interest in his case died, and that it was told in Nuremberg that they had been poisoned. They were Mayor Bender, Dr. Osterhauser, Dr. Prue, and Dr. Albert. Caspar Hauser showed such an utter deficiency of words and ideas, such perfect ignorance of the commonest things and appearances of nature, and such horror of all customs, conveniences, and necessities of civilized life, and withal such extraordinary peculiarities in his social, mental, and physical disposition, that one might feel oneself driven to the alternate of believing him to be a citizen of another planet, transferred by some miracle to our own.